My sixth point is practicing give and learn as a lifelong commitment. Years ago, IWDA introduced an initiative whereby all the hundreds of people present at a gathering were invited to give up a day's or a week's wages in support of one of IWDA's programs and to learn more about the impact that their giving had made on the lives of women and girls in that community. This was a spirit of giving and learning in action. Overseas, the concept of social investment teams is becoming popular. This is a group of like-minded people who want to pool their resources to contribute to a cause they care about. The goal is not only to raise money, but also awareness of the critical situation of women and girls in many countries and the kinds of programs that are making a difference. House parties are another great way to give and learn by introducing friends and colleagues to what they can do to make a difference. And in New York recently, one author gave $100 to each of 9 friends to use in whatever charitable manner they saw fit, with a caveat that they had to reconvene in a month where they'd be required to share what they did with the money. They formed the Secret Society for Creative Philanthropy, an alliance that continues to this day to test the best investment of their money to improve the lives of others. Of course, some people choose to go further, and they're often encouraged to do so by their children who ask the hard questions. This was the case with Kevin and Joan's daughter, Hannah, whose astute observation when they were stopped at a red light 3 years ago, with a Mercedes on one side and a homeless man on the other, led the family on their own transformational journey. Hannah remarked if the person didn't own the expensive Mercedes, the homeless man could have a meal. She then pleaded with her family for them to do more personally to help others. So they sold their home, bought one for half the cost, and then proceeded on a year-long family study of where and how to give away half the proceeds from the sale and how to observe the impact their money had on changing the equation for families and communities. They ended up giving their money to the Hunger Project to aid Ghana, and they travelled to Ghana to see it through. And in the process, Kevin and Hannah wrote a book called The Power of Half, where they documented how they came to give away half their money and what they gained in return. These gains included a deeper level of connectedness as a family, more open lines of communication and trust and togetherness. The children saw their parents as more than just parents, and Kevin and Joan saw their children for who they really were at their core. My last point is utilising radical creativity. There are plenty of people I can think of who've pushed the boundaries using their own creativity and talent to effect social change. One woman who continues to inspire me is Jane Chewson, the founder and director of Pilot Light, and who also founded Comic Relief. The idea of Comic Relief started with a late-night basement gathering with people such as Richard Curtis, for weddings and a funeral writer and director, present. They gathered to conceive an idea to raise money for Africa, and while they were brainstorming, someone had a red texter and painted his nose. Jane looked at him and said, "That's it, red noses for Comic Relief," and the initiative was born. Jane spent a day and then a full night sleeping on the waiting room couch and another day in the waiting room at Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising Agency until the chairman finally agreed to see her, and she left half an hour later with a cheque large enough to launch the campaign. Jane left Comic Relief at its zenith to return to grassroots work. She created Pilot Light as a means to show politicians and heads of companies what was happening on the streets of London and what type of social change was required through changes in government policies and injections of funding. Jane told Gordon Brown, then Chancellor of the Exchequer and now Prime Minister, that his government was making decisions about people it knew nothing about. And to his credit, Gordon Brown organised for politicians, parliamentarians and business leaders to go with Jane on visits to some of these community projects. Jane led project visits to centres dealing with homelessness, drug abuse, social isolation and gambling. In the meantime, Jane had married an Australian and returned with him and set up Pilot Light in Australia to do the same work in Melbourne and in Sydney. Jane's is a radical creativity, a creativity rooted in changing the odds for those who are poor and broken. We need to harness our own radical creativity to reflect and respond to a world that is tilted against the needs of women and girls and whose rebalancing will restore wholeness for all women and girls, men and boys. So in summary, we need to be doing more to meet the needs of all women and girls and in turn help transform our world for the better. Building self-esteem for ourselves and others, embracing leadership and women leaders, recognising the power of mentoring, engaging in movement building, being informed and engaged citizens, practicing give and learn as a lifelong commitment, and utilising radical creativity. We know that women make a sizable difference to the health and well-being of the families and communities. We know too that if women feel good about themselves and are well supported, then they are more likely to act in relation to an issue or an opportunity that will make a difference to their lives. We know that the compelling reason for supporting women to claim their space is because it is their right as humans, aside from the flow-on benefits to children, families and communities. And so what is my final message for today? Well, it's one of hope. Hope for citizen action that dynamically embraces the 7 factors I've identified to achieve the full sky revolution required for women and men. In this respect, the last word goes to Germaine Greer, who wrote in The Female Eunuch. This book represents only another contribution to a continuing dialogue between the wandering woman and the world. Freedom is fragile and must be protected. To sacrifice it, even as a temporary measure, is to betray it. It is not a question of telling women what to do next, or even what to want to do next. The hope in which this book was written is that women will discover that they have a will. Once that happens, they will be able to tell us how and what they want. And we would imagine the freedom and confidence to assume their immense potential in life. Let us work until it is so. Thank you.